This is an AMI podcast.
So far, the cancer has brought one good thing. I have my sister back. Our fights are a thing of the past. The looks we exchange are different. The hostility is gone. Love has taken its place. It may be strange to say, lying in a hospital bed and all, but every time she walks in, I feel really happy. That was our weekly quote, and you're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm Ramya Amudan, and that quote, that preview of this book, which is The Girl with 9 Wigs by Sophie Vandersap, is really something. I thought it was a really great thing to start with. Nisreen Abdelmajid is back. She's joining us here on the show. Nisreen, how are you?
I'm good. I've been missing the audiobook review show, our start to the season. So I've been, it's nice to be back. It's nice.
Thank you. It's nice to have you back. And you've been reading. Actually, this
yes,
is
I've been
cool.
reading. This is exciting. I've been reading Till Death Do Us Part. And I mentioned this to you, and it turns out you're reading the same book. It's a coincidence.
Yeah. Amanda Quick, okay, the way that I found this book is a friend read it as a pre-read for a book club. Then she recommended it to me. It wasn't even really a recommendation. It was like, "Whoa, this book is something else." And I thought, "Oh, I love that, the sound of that." So I picked it up. And then you and I were talking, and you said, "Yes, I'm reading a book, and this is what it's called." So we had a jinx moment.
Mm-hmm. And I'm still on chapter 1, but so far it's a crazy story. I feel like it's an evil story. I mean, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I think you guys will like it. So far, I'm liking it. I'm intrigued, and I hate to be one of those teenagers, but the title intrigued me, and that's why I didn't even look at the synopsis at first. I went straight to the title. I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Why not? And if it ends up being an amazing book, you know this method works for you. So yeah, if you're intrigued by our conversation, it's Death Do Us Part by Amanda Quick. At this time, we love to start off the show with a look at the CELA homepage at a glance, we call it. So that's celalibrary.ca, CELA library.ca. The 3 books, the featured titles at the very top, it's the first heading for everybody, is where we want to start. Probably Ruby by Lisa Bird Wilson is the first book. This is an Indigenous peoples fiction novel. And as we just passed the first ever Day for Truth and Reconciliation, everything on the featured titles list is an Indigenous read, and we continue to encourage people to read Indigenous featured authors and stories and all kinds of things. The second one on the list is Unreconciled by Jessie Wente, and this is an Indigenous people's biography. And the last one on the featured titles is In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott, and this is an Indigenous person's biography as well. Really cool. We'll get into one of those novels in a second, but I want to give you some announcements from the CELA homepage. From the CELA blog, this one is CELA, very excitedly, has surpassed 1 million titles, and this is from September 21st, 2021. This blog post is by Karen McKay. And want to give you a little bit of a preview. CELA is celebrating passing the 1 million book milestone in a world where many people with print disabilities have so little access or choice in reading materials. 1 million books represents a wealth of choice. This incredible milestone would not have been possible, they say, without the support of the member libraries, partners in accessibility, funders, our production partners, the publishers and authors who support the work of CELA, the award programs that they work with who help supply and promote accessible books, and of course, the users like you and I. So we're recognizing 2 of the authors on this blog post, which moved CELA past that 1 million mark. So congratulations to George Eliot Clark, who wrote Where Beauty Survived, an Africadian memoir, and Paul Serge Forrest, who wrote Tau de Ori. So congratulations to the authors and congratulations to Sela altogether. Nasreen, you have what's trending and some new releases that we want to talk about right now.
Yes, so in honor of hashtag Banned Books Week, yes, this week is Banned Books Week, we're celebrating the freedom of to read by highlighting some of the most commonly banned and challenged books. And audiobooks.com tweeted this out. How many of these have you read or listed to? So as I list them down, I want you to think of that question. Number 1, Stamped: Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by Abram X. Kendi, Jason Reynolds. Number 2, Absolutely True: Diary of a Part-Time Indian 10th Anniversary Edition by Sherman Alexie. Number 3, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. 4, Speak: 20th Anniversary Edition. And number 5, To Kill a Mockingbird. That's a known one by Harper Lee. That was a good one. I remember reading that in high school. Good times, I say. Number 6, George by Alex Gino. 7, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. 8, All American Boys by Brendan Keeley. 9, The Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stefan Kobosky. And 10, The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. There's so many more books, but I thought, top 10 is good enough. So these are pretty good ones. They sound good to me. Like I said, I go for the title sometimes.
Yeah, and some of the titles are known, so that's really cool too.
Yeah, it helps. So we're going to go to the hottest new releases that also audiobooks.com posted on Twitter. I'm going to give you just the top few. One is The Wish by Nicholas Sparks. Nicholas Sparks, everybody knows it would be good, I think. Yeah, it would be good. 2, The Man Who Died Twice, A Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. Number 3, Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. 4, The Magician by Koim Tobin. 5, The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. 6, No One Goes Alone by Eric Larson. So also these sound pretty good to me, and I hope you guys go check it out, audiobooks.com. These are a list. There's so many more books to read, so many more top hottest new releases this week. So make sure you check that out.
Yeah, and anyone who's looking for some new content by some of the authors that were mentioned here, there you go. Nasreen got you covered. This is AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. Thanks for joining us on Saturday. Oh man, I want to say August, September, all of it. It's Saturday, October 2nd, and it's probably this nice fall weather we've been getting here in Toronto. Nasreen Abdelmajid is also with me on today's show. Nasreen, I want to highlight and shout out a book that we talked about in the first segment of the show. So here's more about Probably Ruby by Lisa Burt Wilson, and this is an Indigenous people's fiction novel, as I pointed out. So I'm going to read you a bit of a synopsis, maybe a review, whatever you want to call it, from CBC Books, and this is what we hear. Relinquished as an infant, Ruby is placed in a foster home and finally adopted by Alice and Mel, a less than desirable couple who can't afford to complain too loudly about Ruby's Indigenous roots. And so begins Ruby's lifelong identity crisis, which she describes as having amnesia about something that never happened. Her new parents' marriage falls apart, and Ruby finds herself vulnerable and in compromising situations that lead her to search in the unlikeliest of places for her Indigenous identity. Unabashedly self-destructing on alcohol, drugs, and bad relationships, Ruby grapples with the meaning of the legacy left to her. Lisa Burt Wilson is a Saskatchewan Métis and Métis writer. She's also the author of the poetry collection, The Red Files. So this is a great Indigenous read for us, and I've read a handful of Indigenous writings this year. A lot on the book club, actually. And speaking of book clubs, our next guest is someone who I know from the Amir Khan Evening Book Club, which coincides with the Kelly and Company Book Club, and we're all a big family all together. So this is a time where we like to open up the space to review, discuss, recommend, browse, conceptualize, reminisce on audiobooks. It's a big list of things we like to talk about. And our guest for this conversation today is Karoline Bourdeau, member of Amir Khan's Evening Book Club, and much, much more. Karoline, welcome to AMI Audiobook Review. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you. And I know I could kind of introduce you here as just a book club member along with myself, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. I've been living in Toronto since 2013. Previously to that, I lived in Kingston and went to Queen's. And through my time at Queen's University, I didn't have the privilege of being able to have the time to read as much as I wanted. So since leaving school, since graduating, I have done nothing but binge on books aside from working and stuff, because I was just desperate to read something light and interesting.
That is awesome. I love the word binge because I'm also a book binger. When you're really into something, it's cool. So you're now an avid audiobook listener.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I talked about the book club a tiny bit, and we've been at it for like almost a year now with the evening book club with Amir Khan, who's also appeared here on the show. What do you love about that part of reading? So connecting with other people and having the discussions about books, not just reading the actual books.
For me, reading the book is one thing, but actually making it come to life by talking to other people about it and hearing different things about the book and what people thought, and bringing concepts and things that you didn't think of when you were reading, I think is one of my favorite aspects of it. The other, of course, is connecting with other people and enjoying the people in the book club.
Yeah, totally. Now, of course, being part of a book club means sometimes you get books recommended or thrown into the mix that wouldn't be the first choice for you as as an audiobook listener. So do you enjoy that part of it, like new exposure?
Yeah, actually, for the most part, I do. For example, the selection, the book we had last month,
Yep.
I would never have picked that book up, but I read the whole series afterwards.
Wow. Okay, yeah, I totally stopped at book 3. Not because I didn't love it, but the whole series, good for you.
Yeah, I just couldn't stop. I just kept on going.
Yeah. Yeah, and how about other books? There was a few books that I was like, I would have never picked this up. One of them was Ender's Game was
That's the
another
one
book that we read.
I would never have gone to a science fiction / fantasy book. And
Yeah.
that was really cool too. So.
Yeah. Do you get a lot of recommendations from people outside the book club, like just in your personal reading life? Do you go for recommendations from people?
All the time.
Would you say that's your like main way of finding books, or do you like other ways of doing that, just doing your own research?
I do a lot of research. I also just talk to people, and if anyone's reading something interesting, they generally will send me a text and say, hey, I just read something and, you would enjoy it. So, and I would go check it out. Most of the time, the recommendations are pretty good.
Mm.
Once in a while you get a book, you start reading it and you're like, no, not for me, not going in. But, and sometimes books you don't think are going to be your thing. You start reading it and you're like, oh, I don't know about this one. And then you just keep on going.
Yeah, that's a good point. So how far would you get into a book? Like, have you finished books that you're like, oh God, I don't know about this one, but you made it to the end? Or does that usually mean I'm going to have to put this one down?
It depends on my mood. Most of the time, I do finish them. I go through them because, in some ways, I'm very persistent. But there have been times where I've started a book, and I'm trying to think of what book that would have been where I was just not getting into it, and I just put it down and said, I'm not touching that, or I can't read it right now. I'll have to go back some other time.
Yeah, true. So, Karoline, What's the one thing about a book that actually draws you in? It seems that you kind of know your taste. You're not like, yeah, I'll try anything and everything. You might be more particular than that. But what's the one thing that draws you in before anything else?
I am going to say the characters and how they're portrayed, or basically how the story is told. It could be about anything, but how engaging is it to listen to it? Because with an audiobook, there's a whole other dimension. It's not just you in your head. It's another voice reading the book to you, right? Something like The Midnight Library was read by an incredible reader, and I really enjoyed that book. And now, there's another one that I was not sure I was going to get into that book. And I went through it and I really enjoyed it. So, yeah.
That's really good point, because we talked about narrators a bunch of times, and it of course always comes up with audiobooks. Narration is a huge, make or break, right? And now we can kind of manipulate our experiences to an extent, speed up the book, slow down the book, skip through, come back, or you didn't like the version on Audible, okay, maybe try something else, or the synthetic audio altogether. So do you feel
Right.
like you can get through books that maybe at one point would have been like, oh, I'm not going through Gone with the Wind?
Yeah, I know. I actually am one of those people that isn't. It's kind of strange. I do enjoy the synthetic voices.
Good, yeah.
A few of them, the Ask Capula, and even a couple of the iOS voices are pretty good. But of course, my preference is the human narrated.
Yes. Yeah, with the synth audios, I think it might be a learning curve, or it might be something that you don't even want to touch, because audiobooks just sit in a different compartment for you than, just reading an article with synth voice,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Well, we'd love some recommendations, and there's one book that you mentioned during our correspondence that I want to get into. You said you binged it in a weekend, and it's called The Girl with Nine Wigs by Sophie Vanderstapt. So tell us what got you into this book, or how'd you find it?
It was recommended to me by a friend actually in Australia. So my book discussions are not limited to Toronto. They're all over the world. And she said how she enjoyed this book, and I picked it up, and it was odd. Like I didn't know exactly what it was about, but it just so happened to be a weekend when we went to a funeral of a friend who lost her life to breast cancer. And it was just very odd that it was that book that I picked up on the same weekend that we traveled to this event. And the story itself sounds kind of ordinary, university student just starting her life, boom, gets diagnosed with cancer, life is upside down. But what I liked about this book is that it's in her true voice. Like, you can almost feel her writing it. And she doesn't just talk about the horrible stuff. She talks about the humor in the horrible stuff. So you find yourself laughing more times than not. And the 9 wigs are basically 9 personalities that she takes on to deal with situations at different times.
Wow. Okay, there's so many layers from there. I don't even know where to begin. But first of all, I read or listened to the sample off of Audible, and I think that the humor comes out even in that tiny, what is it,
Yeah.
45 seconds or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is just written in such a way where you think, when you read a synopsis like this, where the diagnosis and the experiences coming on, you think, okay, I got to brace myself for this very serious and deep read. Then I listened to the sample and I was like, oh, this is kind of funny.
It was so funny. And even some of the stuff that, no one wants to hear about the process of getting chemo, or,
Oh, yeah.
her horrible experience in the hospital where, she can't find a bedpan or something, and she doesn't want to ask because the doctor might be cute, that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
it was so real.
Absolutely. I mean, it does come across as meant to be light, right? Not just putting in humor to no, maybe light is the wrong word, but not just putting in humor to make that situation better, as we all know, defense mechanism
Yes.
of using humor and as that type of tactic, but it's really just meant to be a funny novel.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I know. I
That's
was
awesome.
kind of surprised by that take on it as well. Like, you don't think of cancer as being a funny thing,
Mm-mm.
but she's obviously made the best of it for herself. And I see that she's got more books coming out. She's got one novel out.
I love when they twist that around, even for a movie, when it's supposed to be something about something serious. For example, like a cancer treatment or something like that, but they twist it into a funny movie, and it's a distraction for many. I mean, yeah, it's sad and it's heartbreaking and it's hard to hear usually, but it comes off as a funny thing where it's a coping mechanism for many people. For example,
Mm-hmm.
like when I'm in pain or I think of something sad, I tend to laugh, and I think that's my coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a nice way to look at it for movies and books. It's a nice twist to it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I was also going to say, for people going through the experience, like Karoline, when you read the book, you weren't going through the
No.
experience of a diagnosis, but it was still timely for you because of what had happened that weekend. And I think that some people can come at it from that point of view also. Have you read anything else by this author?
No, but I just found out today. I was looking it up just to make sure that I remembered the book correctly, and saw that she has another novel, something like This Could Be Love.
Mm.
She has another one that she's working on. And interestingly, she's now living in France.
Oh, okay. That's great. So this is one recommendation from you. Anything else that you want to mention, or what you're reading right now, if you're enjoying it or not?
Right now, yes, I started Empire of Pain the other day, and it's about the OxyContin, I guess, controversy, and not like a huge drug issue, of course, very relevant, but the history of the families that started creating this. And I was thinking today that I am now really, really, really more hesitant to read anything about a medical journal, because I didn't realize that medical journals are created by advertising agencies.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
It was very disturbing, I have to say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly the the realizations behind certain things, and it's interesting because that's probably not even what made you want to pick up a book like this in the first place, right? The
No,
curiosity of that aspect.
no. But it was just something that stood out, and I didn't buy into journals being all of that. But when it's something that's peer reviewed, you would think, okay, this has some credibility, and some of them do. But to think that a lot of the stuff started out as basically nothing but advertising. For
sure. Yeah. Karoline, we're going to wrap up in a second, but I want to ask you a final question that I haven't gotten to ask anybody else who's come on the show yet. Is there anyone in your life that you are converting, for lack of better words, into being an audiobook listener? And this doesn't have to be someone from the community necessarily, but just the thought of anyone in your life that you're like, get into audiobooks, you'd love it.
Yeah, actually, my husband was very, very visual, and he would only read books that he could see. And a couple of years ago, I introduced him to the idea of audiobooks, and now he doesn't read anything visually anymore, and he constantly has headphones plugged in, and he's always listening.
That is awesome. That is amazing. See, that's what I love to hear. I'm still trying to get my brothers on board, so that's my work in project. Karoline, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk some more books.
I would love that.
Karoline Bourdeau, a friend of mine and a member of Amir Khan's book club, which we'll be hearing from a lot of the members in Amir Khan's book club, as well as Kelly and Company's book club. Nazreen Abdelmajid and myself, Ramya Amudin, we are the hosts of AMI Audiobook Review, and we'll be back next week. Happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.